workshop, which is going to be on fashion and the environment. So here with me is Anna Farr, fashion design graduate from the University of Leeds. You might remember her if you saw the last episode. She also undertook a dissertation in sustainable supply chain management, and she'll be starting a master's in textile sustainability and innovation in September. So today we're going to be covering anything that relates to the fashion industry and the environment, and that's the fashion industry as a whole, not just fast fashion, although that will be a big talking point. So we're going to be answering the question, in what ways does the fashion industry affect the environment?
I guess the plan with today's session was just to draw some light to some of the bigger environmental issues that the fashion and textile industries contribute to. So we're going to have a little look at water pollution, textile dyeing, plastics and microfibres, waste, deforestation, and have a little bit of a chat about the natural versus synthetic fibres debate, because I know it's quite a big one. Mm-hmm. In terms of sort of the wider problem, it's a little bit of research into kind of climate change as a whole. I think it's something that's on all of our radars, really, in terms of the climate warming and things. And I found that according to the World Economic Forum in 2020, they have a risks report. They basically look at what is going to be the biggest sort of things that will happen that will affect society as a whole, economically, environmentally, politically, socially. And they kind of break it all down, but of the top 5 that will impact us severely over the next 10 years, 4 out of 5 of them were climate change ones. Mm-hmm. If you look at the infographic that I put on the slides, you can see what some of them are in terms of the short-term risk. This is kind of a different thing they looked at, short-term, that we will see increasing in 2020. We can actually have a look. I think all of them there are impacted by climate change, and all of them are contributed by the fashion industry. If we think of extreme heat waves, I feel like we've had quite a few of those in the UK. They might not be extreme, but they are record breaking for the UK. Mm-hmm. And things like uncontrolled fires we've seen in Australia earlier this year. And I think it really sort of shows the urgency of it. Like, this is happening now, and is an issue now. So we'll have a little look at how fashion industry contributes to some of these issues and kind of what we can do about it, I guess.
It's quite a big topic, so we've kind of, we've broken it down into just a couple of different ways that the fashion industry impacts the environment.
So, sorry to jump in while editing, but the first topic we're talking about is water use, water scarcity and water pollution, because I didn't make that explicitly clear in the original video.
Yeah, in terms of dyeing textiles, it involves a lot of water and a lot of chemicals, as well as like bleaching and things. If you're going to bleach a fabric and then you're going to colour it, dye it, it involves a lot of really harsh chemicals. And where this production takes place in the global south, they don't always have the sort of environmental laws and the technologies to sort of stop it from really impacting the communities around where this production takes place. So let's think like at the minute as well, with water scarcity, it says here 2 billion people live in countries experiencing high water stress. So I think it's one thing that kind of a lot of us don't really think about, how much water actually is used, especially in the production of conventional cotton. Mm-hmm. Water production and water use is massive. I think we've got lots of figures here about them. I'll have a look at some of them. Mm-hmm. Production of textiles uses around 93 billion cubic metres of water annually. That's 4% of the global use of fresh water. Mm-hmm. It takes 2,720 litres of water to make a T-shirt. That is massive. And because it's not controlled properly, it's causing massive droughts and massive effects on the communities around it. So we're not really seeing these effects as much where we are. It's sort of ruining the freshwater supply in Malaysia and the ecosystems they have there.
Yeah, and also we've got a couple of quotes from to do with water and like fabric dye. It's possible to predict the colour of the fashion season upcoming simply by looking at the colour of the rivers due to the toxic runoff.
Scary as well, I think.
Yeah.
We've got some pictures on the slides there. That's the Tulahan River in the Philippines. you can see the colour of the sort of foam that's coming out of these factories.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote underneath from Orsa De Castro, who's the co-founder of Fashion Revolution, it really, you know, these factories don't have the systems in place to be able to, you know, they're being forced to pump out, you know, all these clothes and stuff, but they don't have the technology or the money to invest
Mm-hmm.
in protecting, you know, the wastewater that they're pumping out. So that's going into the streams and the rivers, which the local people depend on.
Yeah.
As well as depending on it for livelihoods as well, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of if they fish in the river and things, that's their, you know, where they get
exactly.
food from.
Yeah.
And as well, we've got that like a bit of a case study as well, which helps put the ideas into perspective in terms of water being polluted, used kind of to an absolute extreme, that there's droughts and things like that, and that the communities are now facing issues of water scarcity as well, that we've got here from the UN water, that water scarcity is expected to displace between 24 and 700 million people by 2030. So that's forcing communities perhaps away from where they live, so they have to move, and so they can get clean water elsewhere. They're having to choose between working and producing in the factories or clean water. It shouldn't be a choice that you have to make.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got an example from the Aral Sea, which is in Central Asia. It's a lake. It's one of the largest bodies. Well, used to be one of the largest bodies of water between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Sorry.
Kazakhstan, yeah.
And that's, we mentioned in the first workshop that Uzbekistan is one of the biggest cotton producers. So they have a lot of harvesting cotton, and they grow a big amount of the cotton that we use today there. But over the years, cotton uses a lot of water, and over the years we've drained basically the Aral Sea, as it's called, completely drained due to the excessive demand of the water and mismanagement of the irrigation of the cotton fields, because they've not got the practices and the technologies in place to look after it. Mm-hmm. And you can see in the diagram, that's 40, 50 years difference between the two. It's almost completely gone. That's 26,000 square miles. Yeah. Massive.
I think now as well it's called the Aralkum Desert. It's one of the most obvious ways that the fashion industry has kind of contributed to this sort of water use. The kind of water intensiveness brings on a lot of stress for local communities, especially communities in the global south where it's already hot, and then it's kind of like they're already prone to droughts. But when like there is this much water stress, then they can the droughts can become sort of like a lot more deadly. And
the fresh water as well. It's the lack of fresh water available, because all of their drinking supplies are completely polluted with all the chemicals that are being used in the textile production. Exactly.
And it says here as well that we've got 20% of industrial water pollution globally is associated with dyeing and textile treatments. And also I read in the Fixing Fashion government paper, I suppose, that rips and tears as well kind of create a lot of demand for water. So obviously ripped jeans are really popular, and pretty much everybody has a pair of ripped jeans. But they make it a lot more. Rips make clothing a lot more unsustainable, which I thought was
it's something you wouldn't really think. I know I was quite surprised to read that. You wouldn't think it would be a difficult process to do. You're basically kind of just drying the clothes a little bit, but it is actually a really water intensive and chemical intensive process. It's quite dangerous to do, and it's an energy as well intensive. You kind of have to treat them with all these chemicals to burn out the fibres.
Yeah.
But not completely make holes in it, and sort of power wash them, and with acid wash as well, that uses all sorts of really nasty chemicals. So I would say if you wanted distressed jeans, it might even be cheaper as well to get yourself just a normal pair of jeans and then distress them yourself.
Exactly. And the acid wash look is kind of, it's not as popular at the moment, but I think people are doing bleach jeans. I've seen a lot of people having half a leg completely bleached, or the front of the jeans being bleached, and you can do that at home, and that's super cheap, super easy, and you can even just bleach a top by just putting it into a bucket of bleach I mean, obviously don't like just do that, because you need to watch a tutorial. Shall we go on to talking about like plastic and the microfibres?
In terms of what microfibres are, they're basically tiny little, I'm not sure the exact measurement, but they're tiny little fragments of the fibres that will come off your clothes, mainly when you wash them. They become agitated, but it can just be while you're wearing them, and they will make their way back into the environment, basically. And then mainly they will come from synthetic fibres, synthetic microfibres, which are the plastics, the microplastics, and they can be really damaging to the environment. Really, when you wash your clothes, they can't, because they're so small, they can't be kept in the filtration systems. They will go through the sewage plants and the wastewater treatment work, and they can't be caught there either, because they're so small, and will make their way back into the marine environment. And then, because they're back in the rivers and things, you can't see them in the river like you can with those toxic chemicals, the colours and the dyes. You might not know, but then marine animals, again, will eat them, ingest them, and then we ingest those. Well, not all of us, but we, humans ingest the fish or the animals that have fed off the drinking water and things from the rivers. So kind of the entire ecosystem becomes, affected by it. I guess now we will have like plastics in our bodies, whether that be from fish or meat or just the drinking water, because we haven't been able to filter them out, really.
Exactly.
So it's really sort of, it's quite scary to think about. You just can't see it because they are so tiny.
We've got a statistic here. It's from Global Citizen, which says we consume about 70,000 microplastics annually, which is sort of horrific to think about, but you literally can't. It's so difficult to catch them. And I think I have read about washing your clothes in like laundry bags. That kind of
the duffy bags. There's a lot of sort of investment needs to be done in sort of finding ways to catch them. Because I don't think we're going to have a way that we can get rid of microfibres altogether. We need to find a way to catch them, to stop them going back into the environment. We've got like a statistic there. Just a single domestic wash has potential to release as many as 700,000 fibres, which is crazy. And you think about how often you wash your clothes and how often, your street washes their clothes and how often your town washes their clothes. And when you put on such a massive scale like that, it's like unbelievable, really.
It says 9 trillion fibres could be released per week in the UK as well, which is, again, like a huge amount. And I did read in the Fixing Fashion report, they were kind of recommending the fashion industry, the water, and like the water industry to kind of collude together with one another to be able to come up with ways to actually get these microplastics sort of out and kind of have like better systems to catch them. But I'm not sure if that is being undertaken at the moment, because the report was rejected, like the recommendations were rejected. So I'm not exactly sure the status of that. I would not be particularly optimistic because it was rejected, so they haven't really got any government backing.
Funding. I suppose that's the issue. I think there are sort of things in the works and there's a lot of development and research, but they need that funding and investment to make it possible on a commercial scale, to make it widespread. You might be able to find a solution for it or an improvement for it, but to kind of get that for the whole of the world and the population.
Like it can't just be one company just doing it by themselves, because really that's not really going to make that much of a difference, just one company. But that's kind of what needs to be done in terms of the microplastics. I'm sure it will be undertaken in the next like couple of years, but at that point, will it be too late? I don't know. Probably, to be like a pessimist, but probably. Let's talk about clothing waste. So obviously this is like a big issue in terms of like clothes recycling. Like clothes recycling isn't always possible because of the kind of fibres that are in the clothes. So do you want to just explain a little bit about the issue with like clothing disposal?
I guess when we're talking about like fast fashion and things in terms of the accelerated business model and the amount of clothes that are being churned out daily, it ends up having a massive amount of issues with waste. And so on the other end of the garment cycle, a lot of clothing is getting disposed of, and that part of that has a responsibility of us as a consumer as well. If you think about why there is so many going to landfill, it's not just us getting rid of our clothes because we're sick of them or they're damaged or whatever. There's also things like maybe garments failing quality control checks because they were trying to produce things really quickly and the staff aren't, well trained. You might have a lot of small issues, but because it's a tiny issue, the whole garment has to be completely thrown away. Samples and things. I worked in a fashion company a couple of years ago, and when you get a sample that is wrong, because the production happens so far away, you need to see a sample in person, and when that's wrong, you can't sell it, and then you're left with the sort of thing of what do I do with it now? You can sell it in sample sales and things, but you're selling it for a lot cheaper because of that. And also the sort of relationship we've developed with clothes now, it's very sort of throwaway, as they call it. You're not connected to it in any way. You might wear it a couple of times and just throw it away, and you can so easily replace it for so cheap.
Yeah.
And as well, those materials and the construction isn't great for those cheaper garments, so it doesn't last, it can't stand the test of time, and it does get wasted in the end.
There's also like the issue of fabric waste, like on the actual cutting room floor as well. Like a lot of companies don't have anything in place to use that fabric. I've seen a couple of examples where people have kind of like been trying to make garments or like small pieces out of the stuff they waste, or been coming up with ways to cut really efficiently so that they don't have any waste at all, but that's like on a very, very small scale. And then obviously like other issues of dead stock, so like the 2018 Burberry burning scandal, where it turned out that they destroyed 28.6 million worth clothing a year. So, and they obviously, that's like, they can claim that they were using some of the energy from this, but the amount of energy that they were getting was just a very, very small amount compared to the actual like air pollutants that they were releasing. So there is just this like issue with how to deal with waste and what exactly goes to waste that doesn't need to be wasted. And it's cheaper, I suppose, to burn your stock and to just throw away bits of fabric that end up on the cutting room floor, and to just like sell samples like really cheaply, because it's just the easiest way to get rid of them, but it's not the most efficient in terms of the environment.
That's the thing with these, especially luxury brands that have their brand is worth a lot of money. Which is the issue that Burberry had, and I think Louis Vuitton and probably a lot of other companies are still doing this, is the issue of burning their unsold stock. When they can't sell the stock, it becomes less valuable, and therefore their brand name becomes less valuable, and they don't want to have to discount this money. They're going to lose profits, and they don't want to sell it for cheap because they've got big egos, I guess. And so they will burn their stock and try and generate, I guess, energy and money from that. And I guess if you do it with designer handbags, the ones that are left over are worth more because there's less of them now, because you just all the ones you couldn't sell, which is a really, really bad practice, because there is nothing wrong with those. They just couldn't sell them. But because of the brand name, and they want that exclusivity, they're just going to burn all the ones that didn't sell in the first place.
Exactly. Another issue with like the way that consumers kind of deal with sort of clothing waste is that it's often cheaper to just buy a new item than to actually mend it, and also we don't necessarily have the skills to mend things. Like I know I can sew like small holes up and stuff, but I know a lot of people who definitely can't, and would probably like just throw away a coat if it lost a button or something, or if there was like a tiny hole. Because I think as well, when you see a hole in a piece of clothing, you're like, that's dead. Like that's over now. It's just going to start breaking, which definitely is not the case. Like you can just like sew the small issues up. Like I have a pair of like joggers that I've had for about 4 years. They have so many holes in it. I just keep sewing them up. I refuse to throw them away because I love them so much. So I'll just keep throwing.
That's how you should feel with your clothes, that you've kind of got that connection, and that you don't want to throw it away because you've had it for so long and you love it, and it's exactly sort of your favourite thing to wear.
Yeah, exactly. But like people just also they don't care to be able to sew things up, and they also don't have the skill. Like one of the recommendations from the Fixing Fashion report was to include better textile education on the curriculum. So I think at my school, not everybody did textiles. It was like an option in year 9. And even from that, I don't think I learned that much about how to like just do like small fixes. It was more like grappling with the sewing machine, which is like really nerve-wracking when you're about 14 and you see this like huge like contraption for the first time. So yeah, like I think we need to address like a more of a consumer side of
and kind of bring back the sort of craft revolution, I guess, doing things for yourself, you know, mending clothes rather than just throwing them away and getting new ones.
Yeah, like I think we have just lost a lot of this like connection to like our clothing, especially because it is manufactured so far away, and because like you don't have to be able to make clothes, you can just order them and they'll turn up the next day. Like, what is the need to be able to mend clothes? And when they'll just come and it'll be like £5 for like a new t-shirt that maybe you would have had to buy all the kit to like sew up, because not everybody's got like a sewing kit at home. So it really is just like we've lost this connection to our clothing.
The convenience of it all, and you can't blame people for that. It is the convenience. It's just the way that us as a society has moved towards that way of consuming is really sort of detrimental. And I guess when we talk about recycling as well, I guess you can take them to recycling points and things like that. But in terms, I think people think, oh, you can just recycle it, you can recycle the fabrics, but that's actually really difficult, especially as we talked about in the past session. There's a lot of mixed fibre content fabrics. Because it's so cheap, they will mix them. It's really hard to then recycle those fabrics because they're not virgin fibre fabrics. They're mixed. And when you recycle most textiles, it will go to a lower grade quality product. It might just be like mattress stuffing and sort of insulation and things. It's really hard to recycle to a higher grade product. Most of the time it will go to a lower grade product, which you don't always need. You don't need loads of mattress insulation. And
no, you don't know. And another issue with that is that a lot of companies like H&M have like recycling schemes. So if you go into H&M, they usually have like bins that suggest that they can recycle the clothing. And I read a statistic recently and it said it would take 12 years for H&M to actually be able to use just like a small percentage of that recycled clothing when they can actually like make the same amount within like days, because there's not the technology to be able to recycle the mixed fibres into something that they could sell as a H&M product. So they really kind of, it's another greenwashing strategy, because you go in, you see the recycling bin and you think that it's going somewhere good, when actually it's not the case at all, and it's just not. It's not.
I do wonder where they go, actually, the ones that you put in those bins. I don't know if it stays within their system or if it goes to some.
I think what I was reading was saying that they like they keep the clothes so that they can hopefully like recycle them at some point in the future. But of course the issue is like, if that was really their like prerogative, they wouldn't be producing the same amount of clothes, because then like they're just adding to the amount that they then have to later recycle, and just like sort of making this like cycle even more non-stop. So I don't trust.
It's like a lesser of two evils, isn't it? Really?
I mean, it's good that they're doing the recycling schemes and stuff, but they need to
you can't take away from the fact that they produce a lot more than they recycle.
Exactly. But I did read actually something sort of slightly optimistic, because this is getting a bit pessimistic. That the UK has one of the best sort of like collections for secondhand clothing, because we obviously have like charity shops, which are like one of the biggest. So we have 11,000 charity shops according to the Fixing Fashion report. We also have like clothing, like recycling bins, obviously we were just talking about, but the ones you get like in like Tesco and like the big like supermarket car parks. You get those like bags that kind of get delivered to your door that you put your clothes in. So we have a lot of ways to kind of not get rid of clothing, but kind of like give it a second life.
Second life. That's the main thing. Yeah, that's the best thing. Well, not the best thing you could do, but it will definitely extend that garment life cycle.
Exactly. So like that's one good thing about our like current system of like clothing, but at the same time that has to be offset by the fact that the UK is like the biggest consumer per person of clothing in Europe.
Interesting, isn't it? Because you wonder what is that? Is it that our marketing is more aggressive, or what is making us want to buy more clothes all the time, or specifically as a nation compared to elsewhere in Europe?
Okay, let's move on a little bit to talk about deforestation and ecosystems.
Yeah, I guess it's not something you would directly associate with the fashion industry, but in terms of growing natural fibres predominantly and regenerated fibres, they need a lot of land. And also fabrics like leather, they need cows to graze and sort of farm. We've got stats here. The fashion industry is projected to use 35% more land for fibre production by 2030. So it is growing, especially with new regenerated fibres such as viscose. They kind of pose as a really good alternative to as opposed to natural and synthetic fibres. But they're called like cellulosic fibres. They're made from wood pulp. And they need a massive amount of trees to produce them. I'm not sure what the exact percentage is, but it's something between about 20 and 40% of the cellulose that you get from that tree. Only 20 to 40% of it can be used for the actual fibre. So you've got a lot of waste there because it's growing. We're sort of using up we're cutting down ancient rainforests and things in playing a part in this deforestation, which is a massive issue in the environment. The fashion industry is contributing to that just so that you can kind of make these fibres clear. So you can make the fibres for viscose and things from the wood pulp, but you can also clear the land to grow things like cotton, linen, and all your natural fibres that come from plants. And then also things like leather, the cows have that space to graze. And the issue as well is that deforestation adds to greenhouse gas emissions quite significantly, because when you cut them down, all the carbon that was stored in the trees then gets let out.
Yeah, exactly.
There's here estimated that deforestation accounts for 6 to 17% of global greenhouse emissions. So you're releasing that carbon into the atmosphere, which in itself is directly contributing to global warming.
Yeah. I think people kind of forget that like rainforests and forests are like the lungs of the earth, which is something that like gets thrown around quite a lot, because they do play a massive role in kind of retaining carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and they also are home to over half of all animal and plant species on the planet. So like when you clear these, obviously you threaten their lives as well, which is just so important for sort of like food chains, just like but local like biodiversity ecosystems and stuff. And like when you sort of disrupt that just because you want to clear the forest, or you want to cut trees down to make wood pulp and stuff, and like sort of they pose as kind of sustainable alternatives, I suppose, because they are natural, but at the same time like they have so many issues that go along with them. And like tencel is another fabric that I see that crops up quite a lot in sustainable brands. Like so many brands seem to be made use like tencel as one of their like main fibres, which is wood pulp at the end of the day. So like they need to be sort of transparent about where they're getting their wood from, because there is a lot of issues with illegal logging. And this is also something that goes along with like fast furniture, which if you're in the main group, I did a post about a couple of weeks ago now, which is it was just kind of like detailing a bit more about how IKEA was using illegal logging from like the Ukraine. And of course, like the same issues would be happening within the fashion industry as well, if they need large amounts of like timber and stuff to make wood pulp, or like they need to
then you're forced, if you've got high demands, you're forced to turn to these illegal practices because you need that fibre and you need it quickly. And it goes back to tracing the supply chain as well. Because a lot of it, where it's coming from.
And a lot of it is like you don't have to be accountable for it. Like in Peru, they have quite a big like logging industry, but 80% of it is illegal. And again, like in Eastern Europe, like Ukraine, Romania, a lot of the forests that are being cut down significantly, they obviously wood like tree roots like retain water and then prevent like massive floods. When you cut them down, you get increased flooding and then sort of destruction of like infrastructure like roads, which is happening a lot in Ukraine. And there was a recent article that kind of linked mass flooding with illegal logging. And then, but you've also got like some kind of success stories, I suppose. H&M, Zara, Stella McCartney and Ralph Lauren, Ted Baker, Sainsbury's, Asda, and then quite a few other brands have all joined like pledge to make sure that they aren't sourcing timber from endangered and ancient forests. I think this is part of the Canopy Style initiative. But obviously they can pledge this, but as we can see with like the Modern Slavery Act from the last session, you can easily say something, but it doesn't have to necessarily be backed up with words. So I would be interested to see exactly like how well they've done with these pledges, obviously like through audits and stuff.
And I think we'll talk about in the next session as well, it shows the importance of certifications and getting that third party to basically audit and look at it. If you need to make sure that it's coming from legal and ethical places. Of
course, like tracing the supply chain as well. Like that needs to be a core value in any fashion business if they're going to make these pledges, because they need to make sure that is the same pledge for their supplier as it is for like the head office, and like the same for like the lowest down like part of the supply chain. So yeah, like logging, I think, and deforestation is one of the things that doesn't get talked about that much in terms of the fashion industry. But as you can see, like there is a lot of issues with it, and it's kind of like rife within the fashion industry, like the issues that kind of come from logging too much or clearing land and stuff like that. Okay, let's talk about natural versus synthetic fibres. So we've sort of touched on this a little bit, how obviously you get like the word natural is kind of a buzzword because it's made from like wood, which is obviously like renewable, but obviously there are issues that go along with that. So do you want to just touch on a couple of the ways that natural versus synthetic is a little bit more nuanced than it kind of might seem?
Yeah, I think it's a massive debate within the fashion industry of which is better for the environment, which should you use, because every kind of fibre has its own issues and its own benefits, really, in terms of natural, they come from renewable sources and people tend to think they're better for the environment because of it, but there's also issues of deforestation, water use. There's often a lot of modern slavery issues within that. Cotton is a colonial crop. And then you look on the other side, you've got the synthetic fibres. They're from non-renewable petrochemical sources. They use a lot of chemicals in that process of making them. They themselves also have big carbon footprints. And then you think, oh, great, let's turn to renewable fibres. These sound like a great alternative. They're renewable sources. They're made from waste products, from timber and things like that. This is a great idea. But they also, you've got your issues of logging trees. They also use very harsh chemicals in the production processes. So it's kind of where can you stand and things. It's quite difficult because there isn't one sustainable fibre, which I think often, especially when you see brands saying things like Tencel and Lyocell, they are great alternatives, but they're not fully sustainable either.
Exactly.
Each of them has their own issues. And as well, in terms of recycled fibres, and think, right, let's go to recycle, we'll do recycled cotton or recycled polyester. The systems in place, they're very difficult to source, and the manufacturing is not there for a mass scale of that. And they're still not coming from, it's very hard to do. And a lot of them, if you do recycle clothing, goes to lower grade products anyway. So it's really difficult to debate.
Just for clarity as well, when we're talking about like synthetic fibres, we mean stuff that kind of comes from plastic. So you've got like polyester, polyamide, is that how you pronounce that? Polyamide?
Yeah, polyamide is the same as nylon.
Yeah, so polyamide, nylon, acrylic, and then when we're talking about plant materials or natural materials, you've got like rayon, viscose, lyocell, modal, cupra, and then of course like cotton, which is from cotton plants.
Yes.
So that's just for a bit of clarity. It is like a big issue, like it is kind of a buzzword thing, and this sort of greenwashing debate comes back into it. Because you see natural and you think, oh, it's fine, like it's renewable, and it is renewable, Obviously, it's only renewable to the extent that like the water use can kind of maintain the crop.
Yeah.
And like the land can, like the soil and stuff, as we've seen from like microplastics, like kind of polluting the soil. So like it's renewable to an extent, but then also you've got like cotton is like it has a huge carbon footprint in terms of like water use, modern slavery, like picking in like Uzbekistan. But then also like it's quite a durable fibre. So like when you have like a cotton shirt, like it's usually lauded as being like very good quality. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think cotton does like last for quite a while compared to like if you kind of are wearing something that's made of like more of like I don't know, a plastic based sort of material.
Yeah, I guess it depends, because there are a lot of, I mean, one of the big good things about polyester and a lot of other synthetic fibres is because they're not natural, they do tend to be very strong, but a lot of the ones that you'll see in fast fashion ones are not high quality ones.
Yeah, so it's just like an issue of like where exactly you're getting it from. So I mean, it's on the one hand, like when you have like a strong sort of synthetic fibre, not from like a fast fashion brand, it's going to have like a big carbon footprint, but it's going to last longer. So that's like one of the big issues, like weighing up, is that better in the long term, that there's going to be less going to landfill, that this is going to last for, say, like, I don't know, 50 years compared to like a worse quality one that is going to last 10. So it's really like a big like toss up between the two. And I feel like you can't really, I don't know, sort of, you can't really come to an answer about natural versus synthetic fibres. And I mean, the most sustainable fabric is what you've already got. So I feel like it's just an issue of overconsumption again.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so it's so difficult to answer, like the natural versus
synthetic. It is, isn't it?
Fibres.
And we've got here from Nicole Roycroft. She's the founder of Canopy. She advises brands to just diversify the fibre basket rather than relying solely on one. If you think of like, oh, this is a sustainable brand, they only use organic cotton.
Yeah.
Then they're relying solely on that. It can have issues within itself, and cotton again has issues. So I think I do worry about, in terms of synthetic fibres, I think a lot of brands now, you'd look at the ones that are typically viewed to be sustainable, they will use a lot of organic and natural fabric because they're trying to move away from those non-renewable resources and oil and things. But there are still benefits to those sort of fibres. You know, it's a really difficult debate, really. But and I think we need to look at finding new ones. There's a lot of new fibres coming out recently. I went to an event earlier this year, actually in February, and there was a company there called Peanutex, and they make fabric out of pineapple fibres, the waste from pineapple fibres. So there's a lot of new kind of fibres being developed and things, but again, we're just talking about supporting them at a mass commercial scale style production.
I'm sure you can make like stuff out of like avocados as well. Like I swear I've seen that. And I also saw recently like people making things out of ocean plastics, which is really good as well, obviously, because like that kind of like rescues some from that would otherwise like just end up like in the sea. It's just going to be so many different materials to choose from in like the next 10 years.
It's so great to see that sort of innovation coming in. It gives you hope, really, but the only issue now is that they are not affordable.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why they aren't being used on a wider scale. You think, oh, that's great, why don't we just use pineapple fibres? Yeah. But really expensive to do because that technology has not been commercialised yet.
Yeah, it just needs more like government investment, and the fact is that governments invest in fossil fuels because they yield a lot of profit. But yeah, that's kind of like a nice note to leave that section on. So the next session we're going to be talking about is how to be a mindful consumer, kind of avoid greenwashing, which is where you can kind of bring everything that you've learned from the first 2 sessions into action. So hopefully you've enjoyed the past 2 sessions and this session as well. If you have any questions, like just be sure to comment them or message me or Anna, and we can hopefully address those for you. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Very much.
Okay.